Do you remember the last time someone smiled at you? A smile that seemed to carry a world of unspoken meanings? For many, that memory is a distant echo, a recollection wrapped in silence and regrets. The last smile can symbolize more than just a moment of joy. It can be a marker of time, a dividing line between what was and what could have been. The story I'm about to tell begins on an ordinary day when Carlos, a 45-year-old man, ran into an old friend at a cafe. They hadn't seen each other in years, but their friendship was strong enough that upon reuniting, it felt as if time had stood still. The conversations flowed naturally, filled with laughter and nostalgia. However, underneath, there was an unspoken weight. Carlos remembered the times when he couldn't express his true feelings, moments when silence settled in where words should have been. As they sipped their coffee, Carlos noticed that the conversation was shifting. Laughter gave way to stories of loss and regret. He remembered his mother, who had passed away a few years ago, and how he never had the chance to tell her how much he loved her. The friend, sensing the change in tone, offered a warm smile. It was a smile of understanding, empathy, but also of sadness. It was then that Carlos felt the last smile was not just a farewell, but an invitation to revisit buried emotions. In that moment, the connection became palpable. The friend, noticing Carlos's internal struggle, asked a simple question. When was the last time you smiled for real? That question lingered in Carlos's mind. He began to reflect on how many times he smiled out of obligation, while his soul was immersed in a sea of unexpressed feelings. The smile of a friend that day was not just about joy, but about the urgency to open up, to share what lay hidden beneath the surface. With each word, the silences that once felt comfortable became heavy. Carlos found himself wondering if by smiling, he was ignoring the pain that accompanied the memories. He realized that the final smile could be a reflection of acceptance, a sign that it was time to let go of what could not be changed. The conversation flowed into what truly mattered, and the shared vulnerability brought forth tears that had long been held back. As they said their goodbyes, Carlos parted with a smile, but now it was a different smile. It was not just a gesture of courtesy. It was a smile that carried a new understanding. It was the acceptance that silences and regrets are parts of the human experience, and that behind every smile, there might be an iceberg of unspoken feelings. He left the cafe with a heart a little lighter, but with the awareness that smiles carry weight. His last smile at his friend was not an ending, but a new beginning, an open door to healing and reflection. So one might ask, when did everything change? It was that day at the cafe, that last smile, when Carlos began to grasp the power of unexpressed emotions and the importance of sharing what he truly felt. What was left behind cannot be changed, but the way we deal with it can transform what lies ahead. That day at the cafe was not just a casual meeting, it was a turning point in Carlos's life. The conversation that started light, with laughter and memories, evolved into a deep reflection on what it truly means to live fully. He realized that often, everyday interactions are superficial, barely scratching the surface of our deeper feelings. Carlos left the cafe with a racing mind. His friend's words echoed in his head, challenging him to look inward. He had always considered himself a strong person, capable of handling his emotions without needing to share them. However, the conversation made him question that belief. Wasn't true strength found in recognizing his vulnerabilities and allowing himself to be seen by others? In the following days, Carlos began to question his relationships. He realized that over the years, he had distanced himself from friends and family, creating a barrier around himself. The fear of being judged or appearing weak had led him to avoid deeper conversations. Now he wondered how many people in his life were waiting for a true connection, but lacked the courage to open up as well. That night, as he prepared for bed, Carlos decided that he needed to make a change. He no longer wanted to live a life marked by silence and regrets. He started writing a journal, a space where he could express his thoughts and feelings without fear of reprisal or judgment. The pages became a refuge, a place where he could be honest with himself. As the weeks went by, Carlos dedicated himself to cultivating these new practices of vulnerability and honesty. He began calling friends and family more often, not just to chat about trivial matters, but to ask how they were feeling. He realized that many of them were also struggling with their own silences and regrets. These conversations became moments of deep connection, where everyone could share their stories without fear. One day, while talking with his sister, Carlos decided it was time to address a topic that had always bothered him: his relationship with their mother. He had avoided discussing the pain he felt from losing her, but now he wanted to express everything he hadn't said before. With a lump in his throat, he began to share his memories, recalling the moments when he couldn't tell her how much he loved her. To his surprise, his sister also had her own regrets and unspoken words about their mother. The conversation turned into a space for healing. They laughed and cried together, acknowledging the pain but also the beauty of the moments they shared. Carlos realized that by opening his heart, he wasn't just alleviating his own emotional burden. He was also helping his sister confront her own feelings. Their vulnerability became a bridge that connected them in a way they hadn't experienced in a long time. This new approach to life began to reflect in other areas. Carlos became more present at work, more attentive to his colleagues and their emotions. He started practicing active listening, something he had never considered before. Interactions in the workplace became more meaningful, and he noticed that when he showed empathy, others felt more comfortable sharing as well. Over time, Carlos recognized that his new lifestyle not only improved his relationships, but also helped him cope with his own pain. He began to accept that regret was part of the process of living, and that instead of suffocating those feelings, he should embrace them as part of his journey. This didn't mean everything became easy. Memories of his mother and the unspoken conversations still affected him, but now he had the tools to deal with it. Once a month, Carlos organized gatherings with friends. These get-togethers were more than just a chance to socialize. They became a safe space to share vulnerabilities. The conversations were deep, and laughter often accompanied tears. Carlos felt that by creating this environment, he was contributing to a healing cycle that benefited everyone around him. One day, during one of these meetings, a friend shared a story that touched everyone. He spoke about the loss of a loved one and how he never had the chance to say goodbye. His words resonated with Carlos, who realized he was not alone in his feelings. The connection that formed in that room, amid laughter and tears, was a testament to the power of vulnerability. Carlos became aware that everyone was, in some way, carrying their own smiles and silences. As time went on, Carlos became an advocate for emotional expression. He began sharing his experiences on social media, writing about the importance of opening up and connecting with others. He wanted more people to feel comfortable discussing their own silences. The feedback he received was moving. Many people shared how his words inspired them to take action in their own lives. Reflecting on his journey, Carlos understood that the last smile he exchanged with his friend at the cafe was not just an isolated moment, but the beginning of a transformation. He had committed to living more authentically, embracing his emotions and encouraging others to do the same. What had once been a burden had now become a foundation for new relationships and a fuller life. And so, at the end of another day, Carlos looked in the mirror and smiled at himself. It was a different smile, one that spoke of acceptance, love, and above all, freedom. He knew there would still be challenges ahead, but he was ready to face them, one smile at a time. Carlos realized that his journey toward vulnerability wasn't just about him. By sharing his experiences, he began receiving messages from people who felt inspired to open their own hearts. These interactions started to accumulate, forming a support network that extended beyond his city. He recalled a message from Anna, a co-worker who had always been reserved. In her message, Anna shared how, after reading one of his posts, she decided to talk to her mother about a misunderstanding that had kept them apart for years. Carlos felt a flutter in his stomach as he read that. He had no idea the impact his words could have. These small victories began to motivate him even more. Carlos decided that he wanted to create a physical space where people could come together and share their stories. He remembered the cafe, where he had reconnected with his friend, and thought it could be a good model. So he started planning a monthly gathering, but not just for coffee. It would be more of a conversation circle, a place where vulnerability would be welcomed. He reserved a community space and began promoting the meetings on social media. The first meetings were intimidating. Carlos sat at a table with a cup of coffee, waiting for someone to show up. He wondered if people would really be interested in sharing their stories, or if the concept of vulnerability was still a taboo. To his surprise, the first meeting had a good turnout. People of different ages and backgrounds came together, and as Carlos introduced himself, he felt a mix of nervousness and excitement. He began to talk about his own journey, about the last smile he shared with a friend, and how that moment helped him open his eyes to his emotions. As he shared, he noticed that the room was silent, but not in discomfort. It was a silence filled with attention. A woman named Lucia raised her hand and began to share her story. She spoke about the loss of her father and how she never had the chance to say goodbye. Tears streamed down her face as she spoke, and Carlos realized that many in the room were resonating with her pain. This moment was a turning point. As soon as Lucia finished, a wave of reactions began. Others started to share, and the conversation flowed like a river. That first meeting became a milestone. Carlos realized he had created a safe space where people could feel comfortable sharing their vulnerabilities. He saw that the stories weren't just about pain, but also about overcoming it. The life experiences that emerged in that conversation circle showcased human resilience and the ability to find comfort amid difficulties. The meetings turned into a monthly event, and with each gathering, Carlos noticed the transformation in people. He remembered a man who frequently attended, named Roberto. Roberto always arrived a little earlier, helping to arrange the chairs. He was one of the first to open up, sharing his struggle with depression and how these conversations were a relief for him. Carlos was surprised to see Roberto become a support for other participants. He began to listen attentively to the stories of people who felt lost and offered advice based on his own experiences. It was gratifying to see how a simple conversation could create a cascading effect of emotional support. Over time, the group started to grow. Carlos decided it was time to take a step forward. He began inviting speakers, people with inspiring stories of overcoming adversity. These speakers brought new perspectives and experiences to the group, enriching the conversations even further. One day, Carlos invited a psychologist who spoke about the importance of expressing emotions and how it could improve mental health. At the end of her talk, there was a question and answer session. People were eager to ask questions and share. Carlos felt a deep sense of satisfaction as he saw that space become a place of collective learning and growth. The conversations that had once only revolved around pain began to include topics of hope, love, and reconciliation. He realized that by sharing their emotions, people were allowing themselves to experience a broader range of feelings. Vulnerability was becoming a bridge that connected people's hearts. Carlos also started noticing changes in his own life. He became more open with his family, especially with his sister. The conversations that had once been superficial were now deep and meaningful. He learned to listen and connect in a way he had never done before. One night, while reviewing the notes from one of the meetings, Carlos remembered something his mother used to say: "Life is made up of moments, and each one tells a story." He realized he had become a storyteller, not just of his own life, but of the lives of others. Through every smile and tear shared in those meetings, Carlos was helping to create a new narrative, a narrative that celebrated vulnerability as a strength rather than a weakness. He understood that the legacy of his mother, her memories and teachings, still lived on through his actions. What began as a last smile in a cafe transformed into a movement of healing, connection, and transformation. Carlos said goodbye to his role as a bystander in his own life and became an agent of change, not just for himself, but for everyone around him. He knew that the journey was just beginning, but he was ready to face it, one step at a time, one smile at a time. In the months that followed, Carlos continued to expand his understanding of what it meant to be vulnerable and emotionally open. He realized that many of the participants in the meetings were undergoing significant transformations in their lives. The conversations that were once just exchanges of experiences became a source of emotional support, and the group turned into a network of encouragement. With each meeting, Carlos was amazed by the courage of people sharing their stories. One man named Jorge, who had been reserved, started to talk about his struggle with anxiety. He described how the pressure to appear strong in front of family and friends had suffocated him. Over time, Jorge felt comfortable enough to open his heart, and in doing so, he inspired others to do the same. This exchange of experiences created an environment where people felt safe to expose themselves and connect. With increased participation, Carlos decided it was time to formalize the group. He began to think of a name that reflected what they were building together. After some discussions, the group was named True Connections. The name symbolized what everyone was seeking: a sincere connection with others and with themselves. The choice of name brought a sense of belonging and identity to the group. Carlos also started working on supporting materials for the meetings. He created brochures with discussion topics and resources on mental health, addressing themes such as the importance of empathy, active listening, and emotional expression. These materials were well received and helped guide the conversations in a more structured way, allowing everyone to feel more comfortable sharing. One day, while organizing the materials for the next meeting, Carlos received a message from Ana, his co-worker. She wanted to thank him for inspiring her to open up to her mother. Ana confessed that the conversation had a positive impact on her relationship, and this made Carlos realize that small changes can have profound effects. He began to understand that, by sharing his experiences, he was creating a cycle of transformation that extended beyond his own interactions. During one of the meetings, a young woman named Mariana shared her experience of loss. She had lost a close friend in an accident and felt guilty for not being able to say goodbye. The room was enveloped in a respectful silence as she spoke about her pain. Carlos, noticing Mariana's vulnerability, encouraged others to share their own experiences of loss. That conversation became a healing space where everyone could express their pain and find comfort in mutual understanding. With each new story, Carlos realized he was becoming more than just a facilitator. He was a catalyst for change. People began to gather not only to talk about their difficulties, but also to celebrate their achievements. One of the participants, Roberto, had landed a new job after months of searching. His victory was met with warm applause and laughter, showing that the group was also a space to rejoice in each other's successes. The success of the group began to attract the attention of the local community. Carlos received invitations to speak about the importance of vulnerability at events and lectures. At first he felt intimidated, but gradually he realized he could use these opportunities to spread the message about the importance of opening up and sharing experiences. He started preparing for these presentations, gathering inspiring stories and insights that could resonate with the audience. One time during a presentation at a community event, Carlos talked about the first meeting of the group. He highlighted how those gatherings changed his life and how vulnerability can be a powerful strength. He saw faces light up in the audience, and many identified with his words. Several people approached him after the presentation, expressing their desire to join the group, which only fueled Carlos's determination to continue his work. As the group grew, Carlos realized he needed additional help to maintain the welcoming and supportive atmosphere they had cultivated. He began inviting friends and trusted individuals to become co-facilitators. This not only relieved the burden on him, but also brought new perspectives and experiences to the discussions. One of the new facilitators, Paula, brought a more therapeutic approach to the meetings. She was a psychologist with experience in guiding support groups. Her presence helped deepen the conversations, and many participants began to explore their emotions in a more meaningful way. Paula also introduced mindfulness exercises and breathing techniques that helped calm anxiety and promote a safe space for vulnerability. As the group continued to grow, Carlos realized that he too was undergoing his own healing process. By listening to the stories of others, he allowed himself to feel emotions he had suppressed for so long. He began to understand that vulnerability was not a sign of weakness, but an essential part of the human condition. With each meeting, he became more comfortable sharing his own experiences. He talked about the loss of his mother, not just as a pain, but as a reminder of the love that existed between them. These conversations became moments of deep connection, allowing Carlos to feel closer to each participant. The impact of the group extended beyond the meetings. Carlos began to notice that people were connecting outside the formal space. Some participants formed friendships and started meeting for walks, coffee, and even group dinners. This expansion of connections was a testament to the power of vulnerability and authenticity. Over time, Carlos realized that the group had become a community, a place where people could be authentic, where pain and joy could coexist. He knew there were still challenges ahead, but now he had a solid support network and a renewed sense of purpose. He was ready to continue his journey, always one smile at a time, knowing that each interaction was an opportunity for transformation. Carlos realized that the mission of the group, True Connections, was just beginning. He wanted more people to know about the space they had created, so he decided it was time to expand the project's visibility. He began using social media more actively, sharing snippets of the conversations that took place during meetings. The The stories of vulnerability and overcoming challenges began to touch the lives of people who had never participated in the group, but who were drawn to the idea of a safe space. The posts caught the attention of a few local organizations, and before long, Carlos was approached by a mental health NGO that wanted to collaborate. They were interested in organizing joint events, using the group's resources to offer workshops and lectures on the importance of emotional health. This partnership brought in new resources and a broader range of specialists who could contribute to the group. With the help of the NGO, Carlos organized a special event called Connection Day. It would be an opportunity to bring together community members, not just those who already attended the group, but also people seeking emotional support. He invited renowned speakers to discuss topics related to vulnerability and mental health, as well as interactive sessions where everyone could share their stories. The event was an unexpected success. Carlos was surprised by the number of people who showed up. The room was full, and soon the energy in the space transformed into a welcoming environment. During the lectures, Carlos observed attentive and emotional faces. The shared stories not only educated, but also inspired many to open up about their own experiences. After the talks, there was an opportunity for participants to break into smaller groups and discuss what they had learned. Carlos was impressed to see people who had never met before starting to share. He realized that this environment was facilitating genuine connections. Vulnerability was becoming a starting point for meaningful dialogues. One of the most memorable moments of the event occurred when a young man named Lucas raised his hand and requested the floor. He shared his struggle with depression and how, for a long time, he felt he had no one to turn to. Lucas's account brought tears to many people's eyes, and by the end of his speech, the room was filled with applause and encouragement. Carlos felt immense pride seeing how that space had become a refuge for those seeking support. The monthly meetups continued to grow in popularity, and the team of facilitators began to gather more frequently to discuss new ideas and formats. They decided it was important to diversify the activities. Thus, they started to include artistic expression exercises, such as painting and writing, so participants could explore their emotions in different ways. These activities allowed many to express themselves beyond words. Art became a powerful tool for communication and healing. Carlos was surprised to see how some individuals who used to be more reserved opened up while using paints and brushes. Laughter and joy intertwined with vulnerability, creating an environment where everyone felt comfortable. Through these experiences, Carlos understood that it wasn't just about sharing problems, but also about celebrating achievements and growth. He decided that in each meeting, there would be a moment dedicated for people to share not only their struggles, but also their victories, no matter how small. Another aspect that began to stand out in the group was the importance of self-care. Carlos and the facilitators started introducing discussions on how to take care of oneself amid emotional challenges. They invited mental health professionals to speak about self-care practices, such as meditation, physical exercise, and breathing techniques. The tips were well received, and participants began to incorporate these practices into their daily routines. Over time, Carlos noticed that his own journey was also evolving. He started to feel more connected to his emotions and more willing to talk about his pain. Through the stories of others, he found a new level of understanding regarding the loss of his mother. He became gentler with himself, allowing himself to feel sadness without the pressure to overcome it quickly. The group meetings became a sacred space where people could be authentic. The bonds that were forming were deep. Carlos felt that vulnerability was becoming a core value among the participants. They not only shared their experiences, but also offered support to one another, creating a network of solidarity. One day, during a meeting, a new participant entered the room. He seemed nervous and hesitant. Carlos welcomed him warmly, and soon the young man introduced himself as Miguel. He explained that he had heard about the group from a friend and was looking for a place where he could discuss his emotional struggles. Carlos saw the determination in Miguel's eyes and knew that those moments of connection could transform him. As the meeting went on, Miguel began to open up about his journey. He talked about the pressure he felt to be perfect and how that led him to a constant internal battle. Carlos and the other participants supported him, and Miguel found a place where he could finally be honest about his insecurities. Miguel's reaction was a powerful reminder of the impact the group was having. He left the meeting with a genuine smile, and Carlos felt a deep sense of satisfaction. Those moments of connection were proof that the space created was more than just meetings. It was a growing community where everyone was welcome, regardless of their struggles. As the months went by, Carlos was aware that the path to vulnerability and healing was not linear. There were days when he felt frustrated, days when memories still hit him hard. However, he had learned to cope with these feelings, to accept them as part of life. Carlos became an advocate for mental health in his community, participating in events and lectures, sharing the story of the group and the importance of opening up emotionally. He knew there was still a long way to go, but he was determined to continue this work. And so, with a renewed smile, he moved forward, not just as a facilitator, but as a catalyst for change, always ready to listen and support those seeking a space to connect authentically. Carlos was living a new reality, a reality where vulnerability was not a burden, but a gift he was willing to share with the world. Carlos realized that the journey of the True Connections group was just beginning. He started planning new initiatives to keep the energy and engagement of the participants high. One idea that emerged was the creation of a mentorship program, where more experienced participants could help those who were beginning to open up about their emotions. He believed that this would not only strengthen the bonds within the group, but also provide a space for people to learn from each other. During a meeting, Carlos presented the idea for the mentorship program. He asked for feedback and suggestions from the participants on how they could structure it. The opinions were diverse, and many were excited about the possibility of helping others on their journeys. This generated an even stronger sense of community and solidified the idea that everyone was important in the healing process. Miguel, who had recently joined the group, volunteered to be one of the mentors. He shared how the conversations had helped him feel more secure and wanted to give back. This attitude inspired others to volunteer as well, and soon a group of mentors was formed, ready to support the new participants. The first round of mentorship was a success, with pairs meeting to discuss their experiences and offer mutual support. Additionally, Carlos decided to incorporate monthly themes into the meetings. Each month would be dedicated to a specific topic related to emotional health, such as grief, anxiety, and self-esteem. These themes would allow for a deeper and more focused exploration of emotions, as well as provide a safe space for participants to share their stories about these specific subjects. In one of the months dedicated to grief, Carlos invited an expert in grief therapy to talk about the different stages of grief and how to cope with loss. The lecture was very well received, and many participants felt comforted knowing that their experiences were not unique and that others were also facing similar challenges. The discussions that followed were deep, and many participants shared their stories of loss and how they were coping with it. Carlos noticed that these thematic gatherings were helping to normalize conversations about topics that had previously been considered taboo. People began to feel more comfortable talking about their emotions, which was a significant step toward healing. Furthermore, the interaction among participants during these discussions was fostering stronger bonds and a sense of belonging within the group. Over time, Carlos started receiving messages from people who had heard about the group through friends or social media. Some expressed interest in joining, while others shared how their lives had changed after opening up about their emotions. Carlos felt excited about this growth and decided it was time to expand the meetings to other locations. He began reaching out to community centers and schools in the area, proposing the idea of creating similar support groups. The response was positive, and soon Carlos was organizing training sessions for new facilitators in different neighborhoods. He wanted to ensure that the same spirit of warmth and vulnerability that existed in his original group was replicated in every new space created. The new facilitators were mostly individuals who had already participated in the group and had benefited from the discussions. This brought a continuity and a deep understanding of what was at stake. Carlos was pleased to see how the mission of True Connections was spreading, touching more lives than he could have imagined. However, not everything was easy. Carlos faced challenges in ensuring that the message of vulnerability and emotional openness was maintained in all the new groups. He noticed that some people still had resistance to opening up and sharing their stories. To address this, Carlos implemented orientation sessions for new facilitators where they discussed the importance of empathy and active listening. He also encouraged the use of icebreaker exercises in the initial meetings to help new participants feel more comfortable. These activities not only made the environment more relaxed, but also helped create a safe space for emotional expression. Carlos believed that this type of approach would help break down barriers and allow people to connect more deeply. Each month, Carlos felt more fulfilled witnessing the positive impact his work was having. The meetings were lively, with people supporting each other and celebrating their victories. Even those who were initially more reserved began to open up and share their experiences. Carlos realized that the group was transforming into a true support network. One day, while reviewing some notes, he received an unexpected message from a participant named Felipe. Felipe had joined the group a few months ago and had struggled to open up in the early meetings. His message expressed how the conversations had inspired him to seek individual therapy, something he had hesitated to do before. Carlos was moved to read this and saw that the group was fulfilling its mission of encouraging people to seek the help they needed. Over time, the idea of creating an online platform began to gain traction in Carlos's mind. He wanted more people who couldn't attend the meetings to benefit from the support and community they were building. He started planning a website where he could share resources, inspiring stories, and information about emotional health. The idea was to create a space where people could connect virtually, leaving comments, sharing experiences, and supporting one another. Carlos knew this could expand the group's reach and allow more lives to be touched by the message of vulnerability and authenticity. As he worked on the website, Carlos continued to encourage active participation in the meetings. He created an achievements board where participants could post their victories no matter how small. This became a focal point in the meetings, where everyone could celebrate each other and acknowledge the progress they were making. With each new gathering, the energy in the room was palpable. Carlos felt that vulnerability was becoming a collective strength, uniting people in a common purpose of healing and growth. He remembered the first smile he exchanged with his friend at the cafe, and how that moment had sparked all this change in his life. Now he was surrounded by a community that not only understood his struggles, but was also willing to support him on his journey. With the vision of expanding the group even further, Carlos began planning special events, such as weekend retreats, where they could dive deeper into discussions and experiences. He believed that these retreats could provide a space to disconnect from daily life and focus on emotional healing. The idea excited many participants who were eager to connect on a deeper level. With all the changes and the ongoing growth of the group, Carlos felt he was living a greater purpose. He was helping to create a space where people felt safe, where they could be authentic, and where vulnerability was celebrated. He knew there was still a long way to go, but he was more than ready to face it, one step at a time. Carlos organized the first retreat in a peaceful location surrounded by nature. The chosen space had a warm and inviting atmosphere, ideal for the planned activities. Participants arrived excited, ready to open up and connect. Carlos kicked off the event with a brief introduction, highlighting the importance of vulnerability and mutual support. During the retreat, participants engaged in various group activities. Each activity was designed to foster reflection and connection among them. Carlos noticed that conversations during meals were deep and meaningful. The stories shared created even stronger bonds among participants. One of the most impactful dynamics was the sharing circle, where everyone had the opportunity to speak openly about their experiences and challenges. At the end of the retreat, many expressed gratitude for having attended. This transformative experience reinforced Carlos's commitment to continuing these gatherings. Before you leave, do two things now. Take a deep breath and hold on to what touched your heart today. And if it makes sense, share this story with someone else who needs to hear it.